Hello, beautiful people of the internet. How are you doing today? My name is Jackie and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is going to be finally my reading wrap up for January. Believe it or not, in January I actually gave 2 books 5 stars. I know, who would have thought? New year, new me. In the month of January, I read 6 books. That's a total of 2,083 pages and an average star rating of 4 stars even. I believe I gave 2 books 3 stars, 2 books 4 stars, and 2 books 5 stars. Let's just get right to the book reviews, starting with the first book I read this year. The first book I read in January and in 2024 in general was The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda. I picked this book up in my little free library vlog. We'll link that in the card if you want to check that out. This was my first book by Megan Miranda and I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was fine, but it was a little slow going and just all in all not that memorable for me personally. This book follows a group of friends with a character named Cassidy being sort of our main character that we're following most of the time. When this group of friends were all in high school, they got into a terrible accident while they were on a school trip, and many of their classmates and their 2 teachers died in this accident. So they are the only survivors of this accident, and they have been haunted by what happened that horrible night ever since. Now, many years later, they are getting back together at a beach house in the Outer Banks, and a member of the group disappears while they are all there at this beach house. Is it just a disappearance? Did she just leave? Or is there someone who knows the truth about what happened that night and is out to get them all? There was nothing about this book that I really strongly disliked, but I felt like the plot moved rather slowly and it took a while for things to heat up, I guess, for lack of a better term. The characters were fine. I just really think that this was a pretty run-of-the-mill mystery thriller. So it wasn't bad, but it's also not one that I'm going to hurry to recommend to people. The ending did kind of go in a direction that I wasn't entirely expecting, which I liked. And one random thing that I really liked about this book, okay, there's a part of the book where, you know, all this weird stuff's been going on at the beach house and some of the characters decide that they're gonna get the hell out of there. And I appreciated that because sometimes when you read books like this and stuff starts to go down, the characters for no good reason decide that they're gonna stay. And I don't know about you, but I find myself thinking in those instances, if this were me, I would already be out the door, you know? So I appreciated that the characters in this book actually decided, no, we're not gonna sit around and just wait to be picked off. We're getting the hell out of here. So I appreciated that because that's what I would do. Would I potentially read Megan Miranda again? Yes. If there was a book of hers that sounded interesting or that I heard particularly good things about. If you have a favorite Megan Miranda book that you think I should check out, do let me know in the comment section. Next, I read a nonfiction book that I had started, I think back in December, and I finally finished it up in January. That is The Golden Age of Murder, The Mystery of the Writers Who Invented the Modern Detective Story by Martin Edwards. This is a nonfiction book about the Detection Club, a group of mystery writers based in London, whose members included people like Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. I picked up this book because, as I've mentioned in my writing videos, if you watch those, the book that I'm currently drafting, Project Dagger, as I've nicknamed it, is set during the so-called Golden Age of Mysteries, the period in British history where a lot of successful crime novelists like Agatha Christie were writing. So I picked up this book just to learn more about the popular crime writers of that period to inform my writing of this book. I decided to give this 5 stars because I think it delivered what I was hoping to get out of it, and I did enjoy reading it. I think even though it's nonfiction, it was still written in an engaging way, so it wasn't dry or hard to get through like nonfiction sometimes can be. I learned some interesting things about the members of the Detection Club, some of whom were very prolific at the time, but I'd personally never heard of them before. And I did take down a few notes of things that sort of inspired ideas for my writing project. Martin Edwards does talk about a decent number of Detection Club members, though I would say he probably devotes the most attention to Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, and Anthony Berkeley? I think that's how you pronounce his name, but as an American reading his name, I want to say Anthony Berkeley. I don't think that's right. I think it's Anthony Berkeley, but I could be wrong. I thought it was a really engaging, interesting read. It had a lot of interesting anecdotes, and I learned some things that I didn't know, so I would call this a success. After that, I read my other 5-star read of the month, which is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is a book that actually lived up to the booktube hype. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, the entire time I was reading it, I was engaged, I was interested. There were some twists that I didn't see coming, genuinely surprising reveals. I had a great time. This is a mystery thriller novel following a married mother named Jen. One night she looks out her window and she sees her teenage son stab and kill a man. She has no idea who this man is. She doesn't know why her son would kill this man. She doesn't think her son is violent. He's always been a good kid. And she really doesn't know what has happened. She goes to sleep that night, and when she wakes up the next day, it is actually the day before. And she progressively wakes up going further and further back in time every single day. So she realizes maybe this is an opportunity for her to figure out why this has happened to her family and potentially rectify it. But Jen fears if she doesn't figure out the truth behind the murder, what is going to happen to her? Is she going to continually keep going back in time until she ceases to exist? First of all, this book has such an intriguing, unique concept. I read a lot of mystery thrillers, and I feel like a lot of them have concepts that sound kind of similar to each other. There are certain tropes that you see over and over again, which is fine, but I did appreciate reading a mystery thriller that is so different from any other thriller I've read. The concept is just fantastic, and it's executed so well. I was genuinely surprised by several of the reveals in this book. I did not see them coming, and that was great because a lot of times, since I read so many mystery thrillers, I figure out where they're going. There was one part of the book that I thought was a little bit predictable, but a lot of the major twists, genuinely shocking to me, really well done, memorable twists. I think this is genuinely one of the most unique thrillers I've read in quite some time, and I decided to give it 5 stars because listen, like, am I gonna remember the plot of this book a year, 2 years from now? Maybe not. But for the time that I was reading it, I was thoroughly engaged. I was on the edge of my seat. I was interested in what was going on. And I think that warrants a 5 star. Like, it served its purpose. I was having a lot of fun reading it. I was surprised. Like, what more can you ask for when you're reading a thriller? After I finished Wrong Place, Wrong Time, I read The Last Party by Claire McIntosh. I ended up giving this a 3. I don't know if I'm gonna keep reading Claire McIntosh after this. I think I gave one book by her 4 stars, and every other book of hers I've read has been a 3. So she may just not be a favorite author of mine. This is the first thriller in a police procedural series. The main character's name is Fionn. I think that's how you say her name. I looked up how to pronounce it before I read the book, and I'm pretty sure it was Fionn. And she is a detective in this very small town on near the Welsh-English border. Recently, this wealthy, very famous singer from London named Rhys, I forget his last name, Rhys, we'll just call him Rhys. He has started developing this community tailored to the ultra-rich along their lake, which has really upset a lot of the native Welsh people who don't want all these extremely wealthy Londonites coming in and taking up, you know, all the real estate in their city. After a New Year's party, Rhys is found dead, floating in the town's lake. So Fionn is on the investigation, and she is forced to work with an English detective named Leo. Since the body was discovered so close to the border, they don't know exactly whose jurisdiction it is supposed to be. Thus, the two of them have to work together to solve the murder. I think my biggest issue with this book is it felt too long. I think it was around 400 pages, which is pretty long for a thriller, and by the end, I was ready for the book to be over. I was like, okay, let's just get to it now, you know? I didn't really like Fionn at first, but once we got to know her a little better and figured out her motivations, I did like her more. I did like Leo, though he's not mentioned in the plot description on the dust jacket. He is another main character, and we get chapters narrated by Fionn and also by him, so I'm assuming he's going to play a part in the future books in this series. There is a hint of a potential romantic future between him and Fionn. I really didn't like the storyline involving Leo's ex-wife, though, because she as a character did not feel realistic to me at all. His ex-wife, I don't think, has a single redeeming quality. It also was kind of funny. I don't think our detectives in this book realize that you can bring somebody in for questioning without arresting them. Every time they start to suspect that somebody might be the murderer, they place them under arrest without getting their facts and their case together first. I think they falsely arrested at least 3 people before they found the real killer. It honestly was unintentionally comedic. I was like, are the 2 of them gonna arrest the entire town? Quite possibly. Again, I would not say that this book was bad. I just felt like it was a little long and I wasn't absolutely in love with it. I'm not big on police procedurals anyway. I don't know if Claire McIntosh is my personal favorite thriller author because I've never read a book by her that I disliked, but I also haven't read one that I've really, really loved either. I am kind of intrigued by the second book in this series, though, because apparently it deals with a murder at a reality television competition, which does kind of sound interesting. I kind of want to read it, but I also kind of don't. We'll see. Next, I read The Key in the Lock by Beth Underdown. I gave this 4 stars. This is a sort of gothic historical fiction novel set in 2 timelines. We're following a main character named Ivy in the one storyline. I was going to say the modern day storyline, but it's not. In the one storyline, it's during the Great War, aka World War I, and Ivy finds out that her son has been killed in battle, but she begins to suspect that there might be more to the story. She wants to figure out, how did her son die? What really happened? As she is pursuing more information about her son Tim's death, this man named Edward Tremaine ends up coming back to town. Now, many years ago, Edward Tremaine lived with his father and his son in this house in their village. I think it was called Polneath House. Yes, Polneath House. And Ivy, who had a bit of a crush on Edward Tremaine when she was younger, he was a widower, and she had a crush on him. One night, Polneath House caught fire, and Edward's young son, William, was killed in the fire. So we also are following that past storyline when Ivy was younger, talking about the events leading up to the fire, the inquest, and ultimately, how did the fire start? What really happened? many years ago, and how did it lead to William's death? I did enjoy this book. It had a really evocative Gothic atmosphere. The book is set in Cornwall, so it did have that sort of Daphne du Maurier vibe to it, and there were some good, like, mysterious elements to the story. I wasn't absolutely shocked by where the storyline went, but it was enjoyable and I had fun reading it. I think if you're looking for a historical fiction book that has that Gothic vibe and really evocative setting, this is the perfect book for that. And finally, I read A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons, the first Saffron Everly. Wow. A Botanist's Guide to Parties and Poisons, the first Saffron Everly mystery by Kate Kavari. I gave this 4 stars as well. This is a historical mystery, the first in a series, set, I think it's the 1920s. Our main character, Saffron Everly, is a botanist and one of the few women working at University College. I think it's University College, London. One night she is at a party with many of the professors and the professors' wives, and one of the wives drops, well, actually no, she doesn't drop dead. I'm doing a terrible job reviewing this book. One of the professor's wives is seemingly poisoned at the party, and so she ends up in the hospital in a coma. It seems like someone attempted to murder her, but the police begin to suspect, is it possible that the killer was actually targeting her husband due to some sort of professional grudge, and she was the unintended victim? Saffron's mentor, Dr. Maxwell, has recently had an argument with said professor, so the police start looking towards him as a suspect. Saffron is desperate to prove that her beloved mentor had no part in this crime, and she ends up working with a young man named Alexander Ashton, who also works at the university, to figure out what is really going on here. This was a pretty enjoyable first entry into the series. I would keep reading it just to see how the series will progress and where it will go from here. I think the biggest issue that I had with this book is I felt like the names of so many characters were being thrown at me. The very first scene of the book is at this party, and the author mentions at least 10 people. And it was very hard for me to remember, okay, who's Dr. So-and-so again? I feel like there were a lot of characters in this book. It was hard to keep them all straight and recognize like who I needed to pay attention to, who is actually a suspect, who is never going to appear in this book again, you know what I mean? And that was something I was struggling with throughout the book. I was trying to formulate theories about who I thought did it, and I was trying to remember all the characters that I meant and who works with who and who's in what department of the university. It was a little bit confusing for me to keep everybody straight. I also felt like the characters weren't necessarily distinct enough for me to remember them. For instance, you know, we meet, let's just say 5 characters who are all professors at the university, and they're all named Dr. something or other. So it's very hard to remember who's the professor of botany and who's the anthropologist or whatever. If maybe they had different careers, different ages, different names, then it would probably have been a little easier for me to remember who was who, but since they were all such similar character types, it was a bit confusing for me. I did like Saffron and Alexander, though. We actually get chapters that are narrated by Alexander as well as by Saffron. I wouldn't say I'm quite shipping it just yet, but they did have some cute interactions. One really random thing that I did really appreciate about this book is there is a scene where Saffron does something potentially dangerous to find out information for the case. Alexander gets mad at her for risking her life like that, and instead of getting defensive and accusing him of being a chauvinist, she actually thinks about it and does acknowledge, okay, I think I understand where he's coming from. I did potentially put both of our futures in jeopardy by doing this, even if my heart was in the right place. I appreciated that because sometimes when I'm reading a historical mystery, you know, consistently in historical mysteries, we see these main female characters who are very plucky and go-getting and brave to the point of sometimes being reckless. And in some books, the male love interest will tell our heroine, hey, what you did was really dangerous and stupid. You could have gotten yourself killed. And I hate it when the female character is just like, oh my god, he's just saying that to me because I'm a woman. I'm sometimes on the man's side because obviously, yeah, I get it, you know, you don't want to be condescended to, but sometimes our historical mystery girlies, they are reckless and the man has a valid point. So I appreciated that she actually thought about what he said and did acknowledge, okay, I could have handled that better. So I felt like that was something that I appreciated. I mean, I'm thinking particularly about the first Rexford and Sloane mystery, which I did not like because the main character in that, she literally runs into a burning building at one point. And yet whenever the main male character brings up the consequences of her actions, she's just like, hey, quit being sexist. And then he's the one who apologizes. And I'm like, but sis, he has a valid point. You could have died. You know? So I appreciated that this was a little more nuanced, where she actually acknowledged, okay, he has a valid point. He's concerned about me. I get it. This could have easily gone wrong, and I'm gonna say that I'm sorry. All right, so those are the books that I read in the month of January 2024. Let me know in the comment section, what did you read in January? Have you read any of the books that I read this month? If so, I would love to hear what you thought of them. If you're still here and you don't know what to comment, why don't you leave a calendar emoji, since this is the first wrap-up of the calendar year. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. Your likes and subscriptions really do mean a lot to me and help my channel grow. My social media links are down below if you want to follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, or be my friend on Goodreads. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye, and I'll see you next time.